So hello and welcome. This is Hip Hop Heals. We have David Williams with us today, our youth director from Hip Hop Heals, and we'll be looking at musical mentorship.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kiz. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to start off by sharing my screen so you can see the slides. And we're going to talk through some of the things that I think are really important in engaging with young people, whether you're doing music or not, but it's about looking at how do we get the best out of young people? How do we meet their needs most effectively? So let me first of all share my screen and introduce myself properly. Okay, so to start off, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is David Williams. I also go by the name of David Boomah. So David Williams in my youth work profession and David Boomah as a singer, songwriter and performer. I describe myself as a humanitarian, a youth advocate, someone that champions communities. I seek equity, and I'm a singer songwriter. My youth work career has been for the past 30 years. So I've been working with young people that are exposed to risk factors for the past 30 years, and that's right across the UK. My background is youth and community work, youth justice, social care, and that's led to me working for a number of local authorities. It's led to me working for a number of national charities. I've worked in prisons, I've worked in people referral units, I've worked in youth offending services, and so I kind of have a wealth of experience of working with young people that have been exposed to lots of different risk factors. And that's also gone on to me being able to develop a lot of training programs for people that work with at-risk young people. And as well as that, alongside that, I've been recording now for about 35 years, making songs, making albums, touring the world and performing bass music, mainly jungle and drum and bass, but I do dabble in R&B and reggae and all the other types of music as well. So, David,
I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you tell us how many number ones in the sort of jungle drum and bass charts you've had now in the UK?
I've had 20 number one jungle and drum and bass songs and 1 R&B. So,
and what about your album?
My album, I've had 2 number one albums, which allowed me to do a world tour. Yeah, I've done a little bit here and there with music as well as with youth work. So hopefully I will have something that I can share with you that's going to be of use. So that's me really. That kind of sums me up in a nutshell. But what we're going to talk about today is we're going to be looking at trauma-informed approaches. How have I utilized an approach to thinking about trauma to engage the young people that I've worked with in the last 30 years or so. And how hopefully that can help you when you're engaging with young people. And I have used music quite a lot in my engagement. I've used music as a tool. So we'll touch on that. But I'm going to really focus more so on actually the approaches more so than the music. So I hope it's still helpful for you. Okay, so. Okay, so as Kiz said before, I do want to just make people aware that some of the topics that we might touch on may be emotional. So if you feel uneasy and if you feel like you need to step away, do so. Let us know in the chat, and we can look at signposting you to support if you need support post the session. Yeah, so don't just absorb something and walk away with it without speaking to us, because I feel that we have a duty of care to make sure that people are okay after experiencing the workshop with us. So yeah, so please do let us know. All right. Okay, so if we're going to talk about a topic, I always like to define the words that we're using before we get into it, because sometimes people have a misunderstanding about the definition or what the term actually means. So I want to start off by defining the term trauma so that we have a very clear understanding of what it is. And actually, a lot of the time when people describe what trauma is, in my opinion, they get it wrong most of the times, and they don't actually describe what trauma is. So to be clear, trauma is mainly described as something that's happened to you, but that's not true. Trauma is not something that's happened to you. Trauma is what's left. Trauma is the psychological wound that is left inside of you after something has happened to you. So I want to clarify, and I'd like people to try and remember that. It's very important that it's not what happened to you isn't the trauma. What happened to you is the experience. And what is left with you is the trauma from the experience. So that's the first thing I want to kind of clarify. Trauma is a psychological wound to your brain. That's what trauma is. So something had to happen. You don't just get, a cut doesn't come from nowhere. Something happens for you to have a wound. If somebody was to cut you with a knife or something like that, it's that the experience is the knife cutting, and the wound that you're left with, that is the trauma. So it's just that people can't see the trauma because it's on your brain. It's a wound to your brain, so nobody can see. Whereas a physical cut, people can see that, and they can see that you've been wounded. And sometimes you don't even realize that you've been wounded because you can't see it. It's not visible. It's blind to the human eye. And what people also need to understand is that that psychological wound rewires your brain. It rewires the way that you respond to words, to experiences, to situations, and to environments. Because of that wound, now you act differently than how you would have normally acted. So, and that's trauma that's doing that to you. Trauma is making you respond differently because of the experience that you had. Yeah. So that's the first thing I wanted to kind of clarify. So that's what trauma is. It's a psychological wound. The next thing I want to talk about is the experiences. What are the experiences? So that's something that people call ACEs. Yeah. So where does trauma originate from? Trauma originates from an experience, as I said earlier on. So any individual, group, or community that holds trauma have gone through an experience. Yeah. Whether you're a child or an adult, you've gone through an experience that was adverse. So it's quite a serious experience, and it's left you with a psychological wound. Yeah. If you are a child, we call that experience an adverse childhood experience. So in the case of working with young people, it's very helpful for us to know if they have an ACE or ACEs, because that will determine the way that they respond to you. That will determine the way they behave, because behavior is communication. Yeah, when people behave in a particular way, they're trying to tell you something. Sometimes they don't even realize that they're trying to tell you something, but actually that sometimes is trauma speaking from their behavior. Yeah. So the next thing I want to do is I want us to actually have a look at some of the key adverse childhood experiences that young people can experience, that can go through, that leads to trauma. Yeah. So these experiences here are the ones that usually lead to young people holding trauma. So we have abuse and neglect at home. We have living in care or being homeless. We have parent and carer problems. So these three distinct areas, any one of these or a combination of these can lead to a child holding trauma, and then that affecting their behavior and the way that they respond. And lots of the young people that I have worked with have gone through these experiences and therefore are holding trauma. And there's a strong possibility that some of the young people that you are working with will also have experienced one or a combination of these different experiences that will lead to a change in their behavior or the way that they see things. And therefore, in our work with them, we need to be thinking about how do we now respond to that? And what, not really allowances, but how do we approach working with that young person? And that's where the trauma-informed approach comes into play, where you are aware of that this young person has had this experience, and you are aware that their behavior may be changed by that, and that you are going to approach them in a particular manner so that you can help them to get through the experience with you without actually making it more difficult for them, because they're at a disadvantage because of their trauma. And we have to kind of level the playing field so that they get the same kind of an experience, or some level of equity in the experience that we are giving them by acknowledging the trauma that they've experienced. Yeah. Okay, now, another thing I really want you guys to bear in mind is trauma responses. So a young person has had an adverse childhood experience. They're holding this trauma. And as a result of them holding this trauma, their brain has been rewired and they respond to things differently. And they can respond in a number of ways. And these are 5 of the typical ways that people respond when they're holding trauma. They either feel that they have to fight their way out of the scenario that they're in. They either feel like they need to run away because they can't handle it, so they have to run away. They either freeze because they just like, well, there's nothing I can do. I'm just like a rabbit in headlights now. I don't know what to do. And they just freeze. They can just curl up and become extremely introverted, and then start looking for alliances or someone to kind of look after them because they feel that they're incapable of looking after themselves. Or they can just fall to the floor and just completely give up, give in. And so these are common responses that people have from trauma. And it's also important to recognize that there are varying levels of trauma responses, and there are varying levels. So you can have lighter, which I would call maybe lighter trauma responses. So if I give you an example of an experience, it's not an adverse experience, but me growing up in the UK as a Black man or as a Black young person when I was younger, that can lead to trauma because of how Black people have been treated in the UK, or how Black people have been treated in America, for example. That can lead to a trauma response. So if I was to use America, for example, as an example, and about how Black men are treated in America, a Black man getting pulled over by the police in America would be very, very quick to put his hands on the dashboards and be quite extremely cooperative with the police officer, because he's holding the trauma of what's happened to other Black men when they get pulled over by the police. And so his response is a trauma response. He's not responding how any normal person would respond. He's responding out of fear. Yeah, because he knows what has happened before and he's holding that trauma. Something that's a bit more basic would be going into the shops as a child, as a Black child, knowing that, you're looked upon in a certain way, that you're a thief, or you're gonna steal something from the shop. So your parents tell you, when you go into the shops, keep your hands in your pockets, don't touch anything. And so now, even as an adult, if I'm going into a shop, I'm thinking, I've got to get my receipt. I'm keeping my hands to myself. I'm not touching anything that I don't want. And that's a trauma response. That is the trauma that I'm holding, making me act in a certain way and behave in a certain way. Yeah. So trauma responses are definitely ways showing that your brain is rewired and it makes you act in a particular way because of the experiences that you've had or the experiences that people from your community have had in the past. Because we hold trauma, we carry it, and sometimes it's passed down to us epigenetically and generationally. So it's quite a big thing to understand in order for us to engage with people sensitively. And there's lots of nuanced behavior that comes from the trauma.
David, just to say that we're going to have time for Q&A at 8:05. Thank you so much. It's been really good to see the trauma explanations. I was wondering, would you have a creative activity that we could start soon?
I do, and I will.
Amazing, thank you. So yeah, we'll be opening up for Q&As. If you do think of anything, it might be an idea to just jot it down on a piece of paper or hold it in your mind.
Yeah. Okay, so my approach. So bearing everything that I just told you about trauma and ACEs and trauma responses, my approach in terms of working with young people and using music as a tool or any other activity is a three-pronged approach. And this includes holistic assessment, a relational approach, and a person-centered approach. And I apply these three approaches all the time when I'm working with young people, because it allows me to build the type of relationship that usually gets through to a young person or to anyone that you're trying to work with. So the holistic assessment is very much about understanding the whole person, understanding their family structure, understanding the neighborhood that they live in, understanding their areas of interest, understanding the whole person, not just okay, how good are they at making music? That's not really that important. What's more important is what they're interested in and what's going on for them in their life, and having an understanding of that. So then I can actually accommodate them and meet their needs effectively because I know what their background is. So holistic assessment is really important. The relational approach is also important, and relational approach is about having a mutual self of respect for the young person. So it's not that I'm the teacher, you're the student, you listen to me. It's more about we're equal, and I want to hear what you've got to say. And I'm very open to sharing who I am with you so that you feel comfortable with me. And that way we have a really good relationship, and that way you're more inclined to listen to what I have to offer you. So I know who you are from the holistic assessment, I know what your needs are, and I now relate to you on a level where there is an equal mutual level of respect with the relational approach. And then thirdly, I apply something called a person-centered approach, which is very much about focusing on what they want out of the session, focusing on what they want to learn, what area they want to do. Let them lead their learning path, their learning journey. It's more about them taking a lead more so than me taking a lead. It's more about what they want than what I'm offering, and then helping them to get what they want. So those three approaches are what I use when I'm delivering music sessions with young people. Find out who they are, relate to them on a level that is a level of equity, and then find out what they want to do in that session and help them to accomplish that. And then finally, there are two young people that I've got in mind that I've worked with in the past, both on different levels of risk. One of them, was on a very low level of risk, grew up with his mom, so single parent family, and that was really the only kind of risk factor that he had. He was very stable, grade A student, and he got involved in some music sessions that I was doing, and he's gone on to become a very accomplished spoken word poet that travels the world now doing that, and a published author. And that all started from him wanting to be a rapper and me helping him with his raps and stuff, and me saying to him, I think actually you're better as a spoken word poet. And he's actually gone on to do that, but he started off doing music. And then the other side of the scale is a young man I worked with when I was in Feltham, which is a young offender institution here in the UK. And he was a very violent young man who ended up murdering someone. But when we did our music sessions, he used the music to express himself and was very, very calm and very, very warm actually in the music sessions. And it just shows you that applying a particular approach, that three-pronged approach, it worked with the young man that was a grade A student, and it also worked with the young man that was extremely violent because of all of the traumatic experiences that he'd been through. It just goes to show you that it works across the board. So so that's kind of my approach. That's how I've worked with young people in the past, using these approaches with music. All right, I think we're running out of time, so I'm going to go on to looking at something that I call the core belief suite, which is an activity, it's a takeaway activity that you guys can use. So I'm going to need to stop sharing my screen and share another screen with you for a second. So bear with me for a sec. And kids, do we have time to actually do the activity?
Yeah, it'd be great if we could do the activity. Maybe if you judge how much time will be needed, and then just steer it accordingly so that we can do Q&A at 5 past. Thanks.
Okay, no worries. All right, cool. So this activity that I'm going to share with you now is called Core Belief Suitcase. And what I'm going to ask everyone to do, you can do this individually, yeah, is I want you to imagine that you're going for a job interview, yeah? You're going for a job interview and you're thinking about whether you deserve this job or not, like, you know, and you're walking into that interview with a briefcase, yeah? And you either...
Sorry, David, could you just make the screen, could you zoom in on the screen? Because the text is really tiny on the, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you.
No worries, right. So you're going into this interview and you can take, there are 3 cases that you can take. You've got to pick one. You can pick the purple briefcase, the orange briefcase, or the green briefcase. Now, the purple briefcase says, I'm talented. And you're feeling, I'm naturally adept with lots of experience in this field. I deserve this role. Yeah, I feel confident that I can do this role. That's the purple briefcase. The orange briefcase, I'm unsure whether I'm talented. And I don't really think I've got enough experience. Somebody else will probably get the job over me. And you have the green briefcase. That is, there's no way I'm getting this job. Other candidates are much more capable than me. And, you know, if you're going in, which briefcase would you want to go into that job with? That's what you want to think about. And it's quite clear that you'd want to go in with the purple briefcase. But people don't always do that, because sometimes they have core beliefs that are telling them that they are not competent, that they're not able, that they're not skilled. And what you've got to do is you've got to overcome this core belief. So this activity here is something that I do with young people to get them to actually explore their core beliefs. And you can do this. You can either do this now, if we have time, and this is what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to think about a negative core belief that you have. One negative core belief that you have. You know, you can put 3 if you've got time, but you know, at least one negative core belief that you have. And then I want you to write down a thing as to why that negative core belief can't be true. So if you were to say something along the lines of, I'm not worthy of love, for example, as your core belief, you don't feel like you're worthy of love, then I want you to find an example that proves that you are worthy of love, because there will be someone that does love you and that has expressed love to you. And then you can put that down as an example. Actually, that can't be true. So I'm holding on to this core belief, but actually I've got an example here that proves that it's not true. Yeah.
And I would also suggest that we keep it light, because we're in a webinar. We're going to be talking not about what we've written, but we'll be engaging in an activity. So let's think about things like, I'm never on time, or I'm never good at finishing things, or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then just think about some where you actually have done that and put that down as an example.
Okay. How long will people have for this, David?
I think 5 minutes is more than enough.
Okay. Should we check in at 3 minutes then? And then we will invite you, if you did want to share something light that wasn't too painful for you to share or for others to hear. Maybe if we just have one person to feedback after, we'll check in 3 minutes time. And you could always carry on afterwards. So if anybody wants to come off mute and maybe feedback, you're very welcome to. And if not, don't worry, we can move on.
I'm happy for feedback.
Thank you, Brenda.
Okay, so I could have a core belief that says I don't have the qualifications for the job. And then in filling out the box that says this can't be true because I know that I've worked in this area before. I know I have the skills. I've achieved really great results in the work that I've done, that I've done before and I'm doing. And so I have sufficient experience.
Yes.
Thank you. It's a great example of flipping it. And we certainly do need to hear an alternative voice sometimes to the one that carries us through the day. So, David, we'll do another couple of minutes to wrap up, and then we'll move on to Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I was just looking over some of the examples that I've got, and I just actually found that very activity with the young man that I was in Felton with, and he really struggled with this activity, to be honest. And because everything that he actually said that he couldn't find anything to negate his negative core belief, because he was that. But he did find one thing. We found one thing that he actually found, and that was that he said he has no feelings. So his core belief was, I have no feelings. I'm emotionless. And then I pushed him on it, and he then conceded that he really cares for his mom and he really cares for his brother. So we found something for even someone that was so hardwired to being very negative, that actually there is some still positivity and there is some light through doing this activity, that actually, well, I do care about this person, I do care about that. So you do have feelings. So it can be the starting point. This activity can be the starting point of getting someone to understand themselves more and challenge themselves to be a more positive version of themselves. But it can also be a great tool for them to explore what they want to sing or write about or express through their music. So it's just one of those tools that can be very helpful to get for expression. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay, I am going to pause the recording now, and we can open up to Q&A. And the reason that I'm going to do that is because sometimes people feel vulnerable, and we're showing a trauma-informed approach whereby we're not going to put the spotlight onto curiosity, knowledge seeking, and questions, because the topic is about trauma. Normally we film the Q&A session, but just for this particular one, we're going to pause the video. Okay, so there we go.
Okay.
Ooh. Okay, thank you so much, David. And this is Hip Hop Heals. You can see our stuff on Hip Hop Heals UK across YouTube. All the recordings are there for the webinars that we've already done. And our podcast, Glow with the Flow, talks about therapeutic hip hop, homelessness, mental health, and hip hop therapy. So check that out, Glow with the Flow. It's on our website, hiphophealsuk.org. Okay, thank you.